When suspicions began to focus on T. Eugene Thompson, how did Carol Thompson's parents react?
T. Eugene Thompson was the son that the Swobodas, Tony and Otto Swoboda, Carol's parents, he was a son they never had. Carol was their only child, and they took to T. Eugene, who met Carol at McAllister and married in 1949. They took to him right away, and Otto was a self-made, successful businessman who subsidized much of the Thompsons' early home life. In effect, bought their home for them in Highland Park. They loved T. Eugene. They loved Cotton, as he was known in those days, and they stood up for him publicly and privately, both, almost literally until the day of the guilty verdict.
And one of the many interesting aspects of your book is the focus you put on how the four Thompson children reacted immediately following the murder and, of course, during the trial, and also how their peers and neighbors reacted. And there was sort of a strange evolution in the reactions of their friends and neighbors. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the reason I wrote the book was not to rehash a colorful crime. The reason was to tell the story of a crime beyond the usual end point. Most true crime stories end when the perpetrator goes to prison or goes to the gallows. I had an opportunity to tell the long story of a crime, the story of the crime that doesn't end, that there are other victims besides the poor woman on the floor, and those are, in this case, most prominently the four Thompson children. Their lives, I should say, have been, as you expect, unusual, and they have in many ways led normal lives like the rest of us, but always beneath the shadow of this terrible crime. Hard to imagine your mother being brutally murdered and your father going to prison for it, but that's what these four people, ages 6 through 13 at the time of the murder, have gone through. They're all middle-aged now. The oldest and the only son, Jeff, is a district court judge. He became a lawyer like his dad, then was a prosecutor, and ironies of ironies, became a district court judge, where he is now. The reaction that they got from their friends, their neighbors, other family members was interesting, as you say. At first they were a curiosity. They were little celebrities, as it were, because this was a story that everybody was talking about 24/7 for several months. But then when T. Eugene was arrested in June of 1963, a couple months after the murder, there was a shift. And the same sympathy and the same kid gloves applied to the kids became one of fear and hostility. Hard to imagine, but these kids in many cases were perceived to be the bad seed. There was something that could be inherited. One of the girls said it was as though we had murder stamped on our foreheads. And they lost many friends. Many of their playmates could no longer play with them. They became pariahs on one level. And they had themselves. The four of them became a very tightly knit group and remain so to this day.
Your book has rekindled a great deal of interest in the Thompson case. And even though a lot of readers were not even born in 1963, why do you think the case is so fascinating and compelling even today, 40-some years later?
I think the case is still interesting because it happened to people it wasn't supposed to happen to. I think if it happened today, it would probably be less sensational or would probably attract slightly less attention than it did in 1963, but only slightly. I still think it would be a very big deal. I think it would stand out from, unfortunately, all the other random killings that we read about in the daily paper, because it happened in Highland Park, because it happened to a family that in 1963 was right out of Leave It to Beaver or Donna Reed. It was simply, these were simply people this sort of thing usually didn't happen to. The fact that there was a large life insurance policy involved, the fact that there were other women It was blood, money, and sex, as Bill Randall, the prosecutor, put it, and it would be irresistible today. I think the book is of interest because of that, but also because it tells the story of the other victims, the family who have lived with this crime for nearly 40 years.
Where can people find your book, Bill?
They can find it virtually anywhere in Minnesota, Barnes & Noble, Borders. They can buy it online at Amazon or at Borealis Books, the Historical Society Press.
And we should add, too, that the book is up for a Minnesota Book Award, and I believe the awards will be presented sometime in May, correct?
May 5th, yes.
The book is called Dial M, The Murder of Carol Thompson. William Swanson is the author. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
My pleasure. Thank you.